Lila woke up before dawn, as she did every morning. The small apartment she shared with her grandmother was quiet, the only sounds being the hum of the heater and the soft creaking of the old floorboards. She took a deep breath, the familiar mix of city air and the faint smell of breakfast drifting in from the neighbors' windows, and prepared herself for another long day. Working at the cafe was not easy. Some days were simple and calm, while others tested her patience in ways that seemed unfair. She had learned to move with grace, even when carrying plates stacked high or dealing with rude customers. Her uniform was ready on a chair, neatly pressed despite her rushed mornings. Lila put it on and tied her hair back tightly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She was not just working for herself. Her grandmother had grown frail, and she relied on Lila's income to cover bills, food, and the small comforts they allowed themselves. Lila never complained. She understood the importance of every dollar she earned and every tip she received. Breakfast was a quick affair, usually a piece of bread with a bit of butter or jam, sometimes accompanied by the warm tea her grandmother insisted she drink to stay healthy. They didn't speak much in the morning, a quiet ritual of coexistence that suited both of them. Her grandmother would hum a gentle tune while preparing for her day, and Lila would watch, feeling a strange calm in those simple moments. By the time she reached the cafe, the streets were already alive with activity. Cars honked, people hurried to work, and the smell of fresh bread and coffee from nearby bakeries filled the air. The cafe itself was small but cozy, with mismatched chairs and tables that gave it a charm many customers loved. Lila pushed the door open, greeted by the familiar warmth and the aroma of brewing coffee. She took a deep breath, letting the scent ground her before stepping behind the counter. Her co-workers were already bustling about. There was the older man who ran the kitchen, always humming an old tune, and a young barista who seemed to have endless energy, flitting from one order to the next. Lila nodded to them, a quiet acknowledgement of their shared routine. She preferred to let her work speak for itself, moving gracefully between tables, taking orders, refilling drinks, and clearing plates without needing much conversation. It was a rhythm she had perfected over time, each movement efficient yet careful. Some customers were pleasant, leaving generous tips or chatting briefly about their day. Others tested her patience. There was the man who always complained about the temperature of his coffee, the woman who would change her order 5 times before finally deciding, and the children who ran around the cafe, shrieking with laughter. Lila managed them all with patience, offering smiles and polite words even when she felt drained. She knew that her calm demeanor made the cafe a welcoming place, and she took pride in that. Despite the demands of her job, Lila found small moments of joy. Sometimes she would hum quietly while carrying trays, a soft melody only she could hear. Music had always been her refuge. She had learned to play the piano when she was very young, sitting on the small stool in her grandmother's living room and letting her fingers dance across the keys. The piano in their apartment had long since been sold to cover expenses, but the music never left her. She carried it inside her, a secret world she visited when life felt overwhelming. During her breaks, she often found a quiet corner of the cafe or stepped outside to a nearby park bench. She would close her eyes and imagine herself at a piano, her hands moving effortlessly, creating melodies that spoke louder than words. These moments were brief, stolen from the demands of her daily life, but they reminded her of who she really was beneath the waitress uniform and polite smile. She was a musician, a creator, someone who could transform silence into beauty. One particularly busy morning, the cafe was filled with a mix of regulars and new faces. The chatter was loud, the clatter of dishes constant. Lila moved from table to table, her tray balanced perfectly, her voice calm and clear as she took orders. A family with young children sat near the window, the little ones laughing and pointing at everything. An elderly man sat alone, reading a newspaper and occasionally glancing up with a smile as Lila refilled his coffee. She noticed him watching her, a faint curiosity in his eyes, but she continued her work without acknowledging it. As the day went on, she began to feel the familiar ache in her feet and back. Long hours on concrete floors were not kind to her body, but she ignored it, focusing on the tasks at hand. She found a certain pride in being able to manage the chaos, to keep everything running smoothly while remaining composed. Customers came and went, leaving behind stories and small tokens of gratitude, and she carried each one with her silently. By the afternoon, a small commotion near the corner caught her attention. A local musician had brought in a keyboard, intending to play some music for the cafe patrons. The instrument was old and slightly out of tune, but it drew a crowd. Lila watched from a distance, her curiosity piqued. She had not intended to draw attention to herself, but something about the keyboard called to her. She felt a strange pull, a desire she could not explain. The musician began to play, his fingers moving clumsily over the keys. Lila recognized the potential in the notes, the melodies that could be, if only someone truly skilled played them. She hesitated, unsure if she should step forward. The cafe was busy, the eyes of many on the small stage area, and she feared being judged. Yet, the music stirred something deep within her, a longing that had been buried beneath years of responsibility and quiet labor. Without fully realizing it, she found herself moving closer. Her heart raced as she approached the keyboard, the murmurs of the crowd fading into the background. She glanced around briefly, catching the eye of a regular who gave her an encouraging nod. With a deep breath, she lifted her hands and rested them on the keys. The world seemed to hold its breath with her. The first note she played was soft, almost tentative. It was a test, a small whisper of the music inside her. But as she continued, her confidence grew, and the notes became more fluid, more expressive. She played a simple melody at first, then allowed herself to get lost in the music. Her fingers moved with a grace that seemed effortless, weaving emotions into every chord, telling a story without words. The cafe fell silent, the usual chatter replaced by the sound of her playing. Lila was unaware of the gasps and whispers around her. She had entered a different world, one where only the music existed. The melodies carried the weight of her life, the struggles and the joys, the quiet moments of hope and the dreams she had almost forgotten. Each note resonated with her soul, and in that moment, she was free. The uniform, the tips, the long hours, they all melted away, leaving only the truth of her talent. As the piece continued, the crowd began to realize they were witnessing something extraordinary. Faces turned toward her, eyes wide with amazement. Some customers reached for their phones, unsure if they were seeing this correctly. The musician who had brought the keyboard stopped playing, standing in stunned silence. Lila's fingers danced across the keys with precision and emotion, creating a melody that lingered in the air long after the notes were played. For Lila, the world had narrowed to the piano and the music. She felt a deep connection to something larger than herself, a sense of purpose she had almost forgotten. The energy of the cafe, the presence of the people, all became part of her performance. She played not for recognition or reward, but because it was who she was, and it was time to let the world see it. By the time she finished, the cafe was silent for a heartbeat before erupting into applause. Lila lowered her hands, breathing heavily, and looked up at the crowd. She felt a mixture of relief, pride, and disbelief. She had shared a part of herself that had been hidden for so long, and the reaction was overwhelming. Some people were teary-eyed, others clapped enthusiastically, and a few even stood, unable to contain their admiration. The regulars whispered among themselves, and a few strangers approached, offering compliments and encouragement. Lila smiled shyly, feeling both embarrassed and elated. She had never intended for anyone to know her talent in this way, yet it felt good to be seen, to be acknowledged. The music had spoken for her, revealing a side of herself she had kept private for years. After the performance, she returned to her duties at the cafe. The energy around her shifted. Customers were more attentive, smiling as she approached, some asking about the music and whether she played often. Lila answered modestly, careful not to seem boastful. She was still the same waitress, still the same person who worked long hours and cared for her grandmother. But now there was a new dimension to her life, one that could not be ignored. As the day came to a close, Lila walked home, the city lights reflecting in puddles from an earlier rain. She thought about the performance, the faces of the people, and the unexpected joy she felt. The piano had always been part of her, but today it had become part of the world around her as well. She realized that her life could be more than the routine she had accepted. There were possibilities, opportunities, and dreams waiting to be explored. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope. The next morning, Lila returned to the cafe with a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness. Though she had experienced the quiet thrill of performing in her imagination countless times, nothing compared to the real reactions she had seen the day before. The memory of the wide eyes, the hushed whispers, and the applause lingered in her mind. She felt a small smile tug at her lips as she thought about the way the music had flowed through her, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment to be shared. She wondered if anyone else had come in just to hear more, or if it had been a one-time surprise. The cafe was busier than usual. Regulars had come in early, chatting excitedly about yesterday's impromptu performance. A few new faces wandered in, curious after hearing rumors of the waitress who could play the piano. Lila moved through the space with practiced ease, taking orders, refilling cups, and carrying trays with careful balance. Even though her hands were tired from the previous day's shift, she felt lighter, as if a small spark inside her had been reignited. During a brief lull, Lila found herself glancing toward the corner where the keyboard was kept. It seemed to beckon her once more. She hesitated, unsure if she should approach it again. The musician who had brought it was already there, tuning the instrument and chatting casually with a few onlookers. He seemed unaware of the stir his little keyboard had caused, though Lila could see a glimmer of curiosity in his eyes as he glanced in her direction. A regular customer approached her with a smile. "Are you going to play again today?" he asked, leaning on the counter. Lila felt her face heat up. I don't know," she replied softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. She didn't want to seem boastful or push herself into the spotlight, but the thought of returning to the piano made her heart race. The music was calling her in a way she could no longer ignore. As the morning passed, the cafe became a mix of chatter, clinking cups, and the soft hum of the coffee machines. Lila moved from table to table, noting the smiles and occasional glances toward the keyboard. She could feel the anticipation building, both in herself and in the patrons around her. Finally, she decided that she could not resist any longer. She wiped her hands on her apron, took a deep breath, and approached the instrument. Her movements were quiet and deliberate, not drawing attention until she sat down on the small bench. The keys seemed almost alive beneath her fingers, waiting to be awakened. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting her mind clear of the usual worries and distractions. When she began to play, the notes started softly, almost like a whisper, tentative and gentle. The sound was delicate, yet it carried a depth that immediately caught the attention of those nearby. People paused in mid-conversation, their attention drawn to the unexpected music. Lila's fingers glided effortlessly across the keys, and as she continued, the melody grew richer, more expressive. Each chord was carefully placed, each note resonating with emotion. The cafe seemed to shrink around her, the background noise fading until only the music existed. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a storyteller, weaving her life, her hopes, and her hidden dreams into the music. Some patrons leaned forward in their chairs, trying to understand how someone so ordinary in appearance could create something so extraordinary. A few whispered among themselves, questioning if it was possible that she had practiced in secret for years. Others sat back, simply letting the music wash over them, feeling emotions they hadn't expected to encounter in a small cafe. The rhythm and flow of her playing told a story of patience, struggle, and quiet determination. The musician who had brought the keyboard watched with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He had expected someone to press a few keys and maybe produce a simple melody, but what Lila was creating was something entirely different. Her fingers moved with confidence and grace, her eyes occasionally flicking open to survey the audience. Despite the growing crowd and the rising attention, she remained calm, focused on the music rather than the reactions around her. At one point, a small challenge arose. A key stuck slightly under her finger, producing an unexpected sound. Many would have been thrown off, but Lila adapted instantly, incorporating it into the rhythm, letting it become a unique part of the melody rather than a mistake. The audience murmured quietly, impressed by her composure and skill. Her ability to transform an error into an enhancement of the music spoke volumes about her talent and her confidence. As the performance continued, the cafe was filled with a strange energy. Customers who had been strangers to one another were now united in their shared awe. Some leaned on the counter, others remained seated, unable to tear their eyes away. Children stopped their playful chatter to listen, captivated by the music that seemed to transport them far beyond the cafe walls. Even the regulars, who had seen Lila day after day, seemed to view her with fresh eyes, realizing there was more to her than they had ever imagined. Lila felt a deep connection to the room, as if the music she was creating was responding to the presence of each person. She allowed herself to feel the emotions she had long kept hidden, the frustration of years of hard work, the joy she found in small accomplishments, the longing for something greater. Her hands moved with intuition, guided by the heart rather than the mind. Every note told a story, not just of skill, but of resilience, hope, and quiet brilliance. As she approached the climax of her performance, the music became more powerful, more intricate. The notes intertwined and soared, creating a harmony that resonated deeply with the audience. Some people were moved to tears, others clasped their hands in silent admiration. There was a collective realization that what they were witnessing was extraordinary, not just for the skill involved, but for the raw emotion and authenticity behind it. The final chords rang out, filling the cafe with a lingering sense of awe. Lila's hands hovered briefly over the keys before she let them rest in her lap. The room was silent for a heartbeat, the kind of silence that feels heavy with respect and amazement. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started as a ripple, spreading through the crowd, growing louder and more enthusiastic with each passing second. People stood, clapping and cheering, some even calling out her name, though she had never introduced herself as a performer. Lila felt a rush of emotion, relief, pride, and disbelief all mixed together. She had shared something deeply personal, something that had been hidden for years, and the response was overwhelming. She looked around at the faces in the crowd, seeing the genuine admiration and awe, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel that she truly belonged in this moment, that her talent was real and worthy of recognition. After a few moments, the crowd began to settle, conversations resuming with a new energy. People approached Lila with compliments, questions, and expressions of amazement. She answered humbly, smiling and thanking them, feeling both exhilarated and shy under the attention. The musician who had brought the keyboard offered a nod of respect, clearly impressed and perhaps a little humbled by what he had just witnessed. As the cafe returned to its normal rhythm, Lila felt a shift inside her. She had always known she had a gift, but now it was no longer a secret, no longer something confined to her imagination. She realized that her life could be more than the routine of work and responsibilities. There was a world outside waiting for her talent, a chance to share it more fully, and she felt a quiet determination take root. She would continue to work at the cafe, but now, she knew the piano and the music within her could be part of her journey forward. When her shift ended, Lila walked home slowly, savoring the lingering energy from her performance. The city streets felt different, brighter somehow, filled with possibility. She thought about the faces of the people she had played for, the emotions she had stirred, and the courage it had taken to step forward. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream beyond the limits she had once set. The music was no longer just hers. It belonged to the world, and she was ready to let it speak. Days passed since Lila's first public performance, but the memory of that moment lingered in her mind like a delicate melody she couldn't forget. She went about her work at the cafe, yet now every glance, every smile, and every whispered comment reminded her that something in her life had shifted. The regulars looked at her differently, and new customers came in with a subtle curiosity, eager to see the waitress who had captured their hearts with music. Lila carried herself with the same quiet humility, but beneath it, a new sense of purpose grew. That afternoon, the cafe owner approached her as she wiped down the counter. His eyes held a spark of excitement. "Lila, people are talking. They're asking if you can play again. Would you consider it?" His voice was gentle but eager, as if he knew this was the beginning of something bigger. Lila hesitated for a moment, her hands gripping the cloth tighter. The thought of performing again made her nervous, but the memory of the first applause, of the awe in their eyes, warmed her heart. She nodded slowly. I'll try," she said softly. The announcement spread quickly. By the next day, a larger crowd gathered in the cafe, some arriving early to ensure they had a seat near the keyboard. Lila arrived before her shift, feeling a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. The cafe was already buzzing with anticipation, and she could sense the energy of the crowd even before stepping inside. She moved through her usual duties, taking orders and serving drinks, while her mind constantly drifted to the piano. During a brief break, she approached the keyboard, her fingers brushing lightly over the keys. The smooth surface felt familiar, comforting, and yet a thrill of nervousness ran through her. She closed her eyes and recalled the music she had played days ago, remembering the way the notes had carried her story. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself that this time would be different. She was ready to share more of herself, to let the music speak louder and more confidently than before. As the cafe quieted, with the chatter replaced by expectant looks, Lila sat down at the keyboard. The first notes came softly, almost hesitantly, but soon her confidence grew. The music unfolded like a story, each note carefully chosen, each chord infused with emotion. The audience leaned in, sensing that something extraordinary was happening. Even those who had been there before were captivated anew, surprised by the depth and complexity of her playing. She allowed herself to play with more freedom than before. Her hands moved fluidly across the keys, dancing over scales and harmonies that she had practiced in secret for years. The melody rose and fell like the tide, weaving a tapestry of joy, sorrow, hope, and longing. Patrons who had been casual listeners before were now fully immersed, their attention riveted on the young woman whose talent seemed to flow effortlessly from her fingertips. A few minor mishaps occurred. A key occasionally stuck, and a string of notes didn't sound quite as she intended, but Lila adapted instantly. Each imperfection became part of the music, adding a layer of authenticity that resonated deeply with the audience. People exchanged glances, whispers spreading through the cafe about the extraordinary skill they were witnessing. Children stopped their playful chatter, adults paused mid-conversation, and even the baristas and kitchen staff stopped to watch in quiet admiration. The music grew more intricate, more layered. Lila's hands moved with a grace that seemed almost effortless, but her mind was fully engaged, guiding each note, each pause, each flourish. She allowed herself to feel the emotions she had long kept hidden, frustrations from the long hours at work, the pressures of supporting her grandmother, the quiet dreams she had tucked away in her heart. The piano became a vessel for her life, transforming her struggles into beauty. Outside the cafe, the city moved on in its usual rhythm, unaware of the magic unfolding within. Inside, every person present felt it, a connection that went beyond simple admiration. The music reached them in ways words never could. Some felt tears welling in their eyes, others smiled broadly, overcome with joy. The energy in the room was palpable, a shared experience of awe and wonder. Lila, fully immersed, hardly noticed the reactions around her. She was not performing for recognition. She was sharing a piece of her soul. As the performance reached its climax, the complexity of the music increased. Lila's fingers flew across the keys with precision and passion. The notes intertwined like threads in a rich tapestry, each one resonating with the emotions she poured into them. The audience watched in silence, some holding their breath, knowing they were witnessing something rare, something truly special. Even the cafe owner, who had seen many performers come and go, stood at the back, eyes wide with astonishment. A soft gasp escaped from one corner as the music swelled, followed by another. Soon, the murmurs of awe spread through the crowd. People whispered to one another, asking how it was possible that someone so young and seemingly ordinary could possess such incredible talent. Some pulled out phones, quietly recording the moment, but many simply watched, unwilling to risk missing a single note. Lila's performance had transformed the cafe, creating a temporary sanctuary where music ruled and time seemed to stand still. Then came a moment of unexpected inspiration. Lila improvised, weaving in a melody she had never played before, something raw and spontaneous that reflected the excitement of the room. The new notes blended perfectly with the earlier composition, creating a piece that felt alive, evolving with every passing second. The crowd's reaction was immediate: gasps, soft cries, and an undercurrent of excitement that filled the space. Even seasoned musicians would have been impressed by the skill and intuition she displayed. As she neared the end of the performance, Lila allowed herself to slow, letting the final notes linger in the air. Silence fell for a moment, heavy with respect and wonder. Then, slowly, the cafe erupted in applause. The sound was overwhelming, a mix of cheers, clapping, and exclamations of astonishment. People rose to their feet, some shouting words of admiration, others simply smiling, unable to express their amazement in words. Lila's face flushed with a mixture of pride and humility. She had shared more than music. She had shared a piece of herself. The applause continued, some people returning to their seats but still clapping, while others approached to offer congratulations. Lila thanked them softly, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. She felt a warm glow of connection, realizing that the music had bridged the gap between her and everyone in the room. She had touched them in a way that went beyond talent or skill. It was the authenticity, the raw emotion, and the courage to step forward that resonated. The musician who had brought the keyboard finally spoke, his voice filled with admiration. "I've never seen anything like that," he said. Lila nodded, feeling shy but grateful. She realized that her gift had a power she hadn't fully understood until now. It wasn't just about playing notes. It was about telling a story, connecting with others, and allowing them to feel what she felt. The experience was transformative not just for the audience but for her as well. After the performance, the cafe gradually returned to its usual rhythm. Patrons lingered, chatting excitedly about what they had witnessed, some making plans to return just to hear her play again. Lila resumed her duties, but the energy in her movements was different. She walked with a quiet confidence, her eyes brighter, her steps lighter. She had faced the challenge of performing publicly and had done so with grace and brilliance. She knew this was only the beginning, that her journey as a musician was unfolding in ways she could not yet fully imagine. That evening, as Lila returned home, the city lights seemed to shine brighter, reflecting her mood. She thought about the music, the reactions of the people, and the unexpected sense of freedom she had felt while playing. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a bridge to a world she had only dreamed of, a path to expressing the deepest parts of herself. She knew challenges would come, that balancing her work and her newfound opportunities would not be easy, but for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that her dreams were possible. In the quiet of her apartment, Lila sat by the window, listening to the distant sounds of the city. She imagined herself at the piano again, letting her fingers move across the keys with the same ease and emotion she had displayed that afternoon. The memory of the crowd, their awe, and their applause remained vivid, fueling her determination. She felt a surge of inspiration, a realization that her life had changed, that her music had the power to touch hearts and open doors she had never dared to approach before. Lila knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and perhaps new performances. But she was ready. The shy, quiet waitress who had once kept her talent hidden was becoming someone who could embrace her gift and share it with the world. And as she drifted to sleep that night, the melodies she had played the day before echoed in her mind, a gentle reminder that she had found her voice, and it was only the beginning of a remarkable journey. The cafe had grown busier in the weeks since Lila's second performance. News of her talent had spread quietly through word of mouth, with some customers arriving specifically to see the waitress who could play the piano so beautifully. Lila continued her work with the same calm efficiency, but the anticipation in the air was different now. People whispered excitedly as she moved through the cafe, glancing at the keyboard with curiosity and admiration. Lila felt the pull of the instrument more strongly with each passing day, and although she sometimes hesitated, she knew that the music had become a part of her life she could not ignore. One morning, as she prepared the cafe for opening, the owner approached her with a thoughtful expression. "Lila," he began, "there's a community event this weekend. It's small, but they're asking if someone could perform. Would you be willing?" She paused, her hands stilling on the counter. The thought of performing in a slightly larger setting, in front of people she had never met, made her heart race. Yet, she also felt a spark of excitement. The cafe performances had been thrilling, but this was a chance to reach new listeners, to let her music touch more lives. With a quiet nod, she agreed. As the week progressed, Lila found herself imagining the performance in vivid detail. She practiced mentally during quiet moments at the cafe, replaying melodies in her mind and refining the emotions she wanted to convey. Though she had no piano at home, the memory of the keys under her fingers was enough to keep her music alive. The anticipation brought both excitement and a hint of anxiety. She wondered how the audience would respond, whether she would stumble, and whether she could convey the depth of her emotions as she had at the cafe. The day of the event arrived, and Lila walked into the small community hall with a mix of nerves and determination. The room was modest but welcoming, filled with chairs and a small stage with a piano that looked well used. People were chatting quietly, glancing toward the stage with curiosity. Lila moved to the piano, her hands brushing over the keys, feeling the familiar comfort of the instrument. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she was ready. The music had always been a part of her, waiting for this exact moment to be shared. As she began to play, the opening notes were soft, almost hesitant, but they quickly grew in confidence. The audience immediately sensed the emotion in her performance. People leaned forward in their seats, listening intently, some closing their eyes to immerse themselves fully in the music. Lila allowed herself to be guided by the emotions she felt in that moment. The excitement, the nervousness, the joy, and the longing. Each note was deliberate, carrying a story of years of practice, struggle, and quiet determination. Partway through the performance, a sudden challenge arose. A loud crash from the back of the hall startled her. Someone had dropped a chair, and the sound echoed loudly across the room. For a moment, her fingers hesitated over the keys, and a slight tremor ran through her hands. The audience murmured softly, sensing her brief pause. But Lila quickly recovered. She transformed the interruption into a pause in the music, using it to build tension and draw the audience even deeper into the story she was telling. The incident became part of the performance, highlighting her poise and adaptability. As the music continued, the complexity of her playing increased. Lila incorporated faster runs, intricate chords, and gentle arpeggios, each movement carefully designed to evoke emotion. The audience was captivated. Some leaned forward, holding their breath, while others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Lila felt a deep connection to every person in the room. The music was no longer just a personal expression. It had become a shared experience, a bridge between her and the listeners. A few people in the audience were skeptical at first. They had heard about the talented waitress but had not expected the depth and range of her performance. As the notes unfolded, their doubt transformed into awe. Whispers of admiration spread quietly through the hall, and even the skeptics found themselves drawn into the story she was telling through the piano. Lila's hands moved with precision and emotion, conveying not just skill, but a profound understanding of the music's soul. Midway through the performance, another challenge appeared. The piano had a key that was slightly sticky, and it produced a dull sound when pressed. Many would have been thrown off, but Lila adapted instantly, weaving the imperfection into her melody. The audience noticed the subtle variation but did not see it as a mistake. Instead, it became part of the music's character. Her ability to turn obstacles into artistry impressed everyone watching, showcasing not only her talent, but also her resilience and quick thinking. The crescendo of her performance approached, and Lila allowed herself to fully immerse in the music. Her fingers danced over the keys with speed and grace, creating harmonies that were both powerful and delicate. Each note told a story of hard work, dreams, hidden talent, and the courage to step forward despite fear. The room was silent except for the music, and every person felt as if they were part of a magical, unfolding narrative. As the final notes approached, Lila slowed her tempo, letting each chord linger just long enough for the audience to feel its weight. Silence fell for a brief moment, filled with admiration and amazement. Then, the room erupted into applause. People stood, clapping and cheering. Some even moved to tears. The intensity of the response was overwhelming, and Lila felt a mixture of pride, relief, and humility. She had faced unexpected challenges, navigated disruptions, and yet had delivered a performance that touched every person in the hall. After the applause subsided, several people approached her, expressing their admiration and curiosity. A local music teacher asked if she had formal training, while a parent of a young child commented on how inspirational it was to see someone so humble perform with such brilliance. Lila responded modestly, her voice soft and sincere, explaining that she had learned the piano years ago and had always loved music. She did not exaggerate or boast, allowing her performance to speak for itself. The experience left a lasting impression on Lila. She realized that her talent had the power not only to entertain but also to inspire, to connect people in a way few other things could. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that the music within her was ready to reach beyond the cafe, beyond her small community, and touch lives in ways she had never imagined. The challenges she faced that day, distractions, unexpected mishaps, and self-doubt, had only strengthened her resolve and confidence. As Lila returned home that evening, she reflected on the performance, replaying each moment in her mind. She thought about the faces of the audience, the energy in the hall, and the emotions she had felt while playing. It had been both exhausting and exhilarating, a true test of her abilities and her courage. Yet, she also recognized the joy and fulfillment that came from embracing her gift, from sharing a part of herself that had long remained hidden. That night, Lila sat by her window, looking out at the city lights. She imagined herself playing again, feeling the piano keys beneath her fingers, letting her music fill the space and connect with those who listened. She knew challenges would continue to arise, but she also knew she had the strength and skill to face them. The experience had shown her that her music was not just talent. It was a voice, a story, and a way to touch the hearts of others. With that thought, Lila allowed herself to dream. She thought of future performances, larger audiences, and the possibility of pursuing her music more seriously. She felt excitement mingled with a quiet determination. The challenges of that day, the unexpected disruptions, and the intense emotions had all become part of her growth as a musician. She realized that every obstacle was an opportunity to rise, to create something more beautiful, and to reveal her genius to the world. And as she drifted off to sleep, the melodies she had played continued to echo in her mind, a reminder that her journey was only beginning. The following weekend, Lila found herself at a small but prestigious local event. The room was larger than any place she had performed before, and a sense of excitement and nervousness buzzed in the air. People filled the chairs, chatting quietly, some glancing toward the stage with curiosity, others with the expectation of hearing something extraordinary. Lila's heart raced as she walked toward the piano, her hands brushing lightly over the polished keys. The instrument was new to her, unfamiliar, but she felt the same comforting pull she always did when she touched the keys. As she sat down, the chatter in the room slowly faded, replaced by anticipation. Lila took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. This was not just another performance at the cafe. It was a chance to reach more people, to show the depth of her talent, and to push herself beyond her comfort zone. She closed her eyes briefly, imagining the melodies she wanted to create, and then began to play. The opening notes were soft, gentle, drawing the audience into a world of calm and beauty. Lila's fingers moved carefully at first, exploring the piano, finding the resonance of the keys. The room seemed to hold its breath as the music began to unfold. She allowed herself to relax, letting the melody grow naturally, each note expressing a part of herself she had never shared so openly before. As the performance continued, Lila's confidence blossomed. She played with more freedom, her fingers dancing over the keys, creating harmonies that intertwined like stories within stories. The music was expressive, conveying both her quiet struggles and the joy she felt in sharing her gift. The audience was captivated, leaning forward in their seats, some closing their eyes to absorb every sound. Even those who had been skeptical of the rumors about the talented waitress were drawn in, their doubts melting away in the face of her extraordinary performance. At one point, the music swelled, building to a powerful crescendo. Lila's fingers moved rapidly, yet gracefully, over the keys, producing a torrent of sound that filled the room. The notes carried emotion, strength, determination, and a deep, unspoken vulnerability. She could feel the energy of the audience responding, their silent awe encouraging her to pour even more of herself into the performance. Every chord resonated not only in the room but also within her, a reflection of her growth and courage. Suddenly, an unexpected challenge arose. A section of the piano felt slightly off, a key sticking in the middle of a fast passage. For a brief moment, Lila hesitated, her mind racing. She knew that many would stumble or lose confidence, but she had learned from previous experiences. Instead of panicking, she adjusted her rhythm, incorporating the imperfection into the music. The slight variation added a unique texture, making the performance feel more alive, more personal. The audience sensed the authenticity, their admiration deepening. The music continued to evolve, shifting between soft, tender passages and bold, dramatic sequences. Lila allowed herself to improvise, following the emotions that surged through her. She had never played these exact sequences before, yet the notes flowed naturally, guided by her heart and intuition. The audience was spellbound, witnessing not just skill but a connection between the performer and the music that was profound and rare. People's reactions were immediate and intense. Some were visibly moved, their eyes glistening with tears. Others clapped softly during the quieter sections, unable to contain their admiration. A few whispered to their neighbors, expressing disbelief and awe at what they were witnessing. Children sat silently, captivated by the sound, and adults found themselves leaning closer, drawn into the story Lila was telling with each note. The room became a shared space of emotion and wonder, the music acting as a bridge between Lila and everyone present. As she approached the climax of the performance, Lila's emotions surged. She let herself play with full intensity, fingers moving with a combination of precision and passion. Each chord resonated with her experiences. Years of hard work, the long hours at the cafe, the quiet dreams she had nurtured, and the courage it had taken to step into the spotlight. The music became a reflection of her life, her struggles, and her triumphs. The audience was completely absorbed. Some held their breath, knowing that the final moments were approaching. The tension and anticipation built, creating a shared excitement that seemed to pulse through the room. Lila's performance was no longer just about the notes she played. It was about the emotions she conveyed and the connections she fostered. The music spoke to everyone present, touching hearts and inspiring awe. Finally, the last notes rang out, lingering in the air like a gentle echo. Silence fell for a heartbeat, heavy with respect and admiration. Then the applause began. It started slowly, a ripple of appreciation, and quickly grew into a thunderous response. People stood, clapping and cheering, some even shouting words of praise. The intensity of the reaction was overwhelming, and Lila felt a mixture of relief, pride, and humility. She had given everything to the music, and the audience had responded with genuine emotion and admiration. The energy in the room remained high even after the applause subsided. People approached her with compliments, questions, and expressions of wonder. Some wanted to know if she had formal training, while others simply wanted to share how moved they had been. Lila responded modestly, smiling and thanking each person. She did not exaggerate or boast, allowing her music to speak for itself. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her gift had touched others in a profound way. After the performance, Lila stayed for a while, answering questions and chatting quietly with a few of the audience members who lingered. She felt a connection with them, realizing that her music had created a space where people could share emotions without words. The experience reinforced her understanding that her talent was not just for entertainment. It was a way to communicate, to inspire, and to connect deeply with others. As she left the venue that evening, Lila walked through the quiet streets, reflecting on the performance. The city lights shimmered around her, and she felt a sense of exhilaration mixed with calm satisfaction. She knew that this performance was a turning point, a moment that would influence the next steps of her journey. The audience's reaction had been overwhelming, and it gave her the courage to continue pursuing her gift, to explore new opportunities, and to share her music with an even broader audience. That night, Lila sat by her window, replaying the performance in her mind. She thought about the emotions she had conveyed, the challenges she had overcome, and the audience's reactions. She realized that the music had become more than a talent. It was a voice, a story, and a bridge connecting her to the world. She allowed herself to dream about future performances, larger audiences, and the possibility of pursuing music more seriously. The experience had strengthened her confidence and determination, showing her that every challenge could be overcome with focus, passion, and authenticity. As she drifted off to sleep, the melodies she had played echoed in her mind, a gentle reminder that her journey was far from over. She knew that more challenges, opportunities, and moments of growth awaited her. But for the first time, she felt ready to face them, confident in her talent and the power of her music to touch lives. Lila understood that this was only the beginning, and the world was ready to hear her story through the piano. After the clapping had finally settled and the last few audience members had trickled out, Lila stayed behind for a moment, sitting quietly at the piano. The room was empty now, but the echoes of her performance lingered in the air like a soft memory. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, savoring the feeling, the sound, and the emotion that had passed through them. It had been a journey from her small cafe to the stage, and the journey had taught her something invaluable. Her music had the power to connect, to inspire, and to transform not just her own life but the lives of those who listened. When she finally stood, the weight of the day hit her in full force. The exhilaration of performing, the intensity of emotions, and the attention she had received left her feeling both energized and exhausted. She packed her belongings slowly, careful not to rush, and walked out into the cool evening air. The streets were quiet, and the city lights shimmered on the wet pavement from a recent drizzle. Lila felt a sense of calm settle over her, a quiet confidence that had been growing ever since her first performance in the cafe. The following days brought unexpected opportunities. People who had been in the audience reached out, offering encouragement, connections, and invitations to perform at local events. A music teacher who had attended the performance suggested that she consider formal training to refine her skills and expand her potential. A small music venue asked if she could play for an upcoming show, curious to see if the magic they had witnessed could happen again. Lila felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Each opportunity was thrilling, but she also knew it meant stepping further out of the comfort and safety of her cafe routine. She continued to work at the cafe, but everything had changed. The regular customers treated her with a new respect, some greeting her warmly and others offering words of encouragement. New visitors came, curious to see the waitress who had become somewhat of a local legend. Lila smiled at the attention but kept her humility intact. She had never sought fame. She only wanted to share the music that had always been part of her soul. Yet, she couldn't deny the joy of seeing how her talent could touch others so deeply. One afternoon, as she was serving coffee to a small group of patrons, a man approached her with a gentle smile. He introduced himself as a local music producer who had heard about her performances. He spoke softly but with genuine enthusiasm, explaining that he was looking for someone with raw talent and emotion, someone who could bring authenticity to a larger audience. Lila listened, her heart pounding. The idea of performing on a bigger stage, reaching more people, both excited and terrified her. She had always dreamed of sharing her music more widely, but the reality of it felt overwhelming. Despite her initial nervousness, she agreed to meet with him for a discussion about possibilities. That evening, she sat at her small desk at home, notebook and pencil ready, jotting down thoughts, ideas, and melodies she had been imagining for weeks. She realized that her journey was no longer confined to the cafe, that her music could carry her to places she had only dreamed about. Her grandmother, sitting quietly in the living room, looked up and smiled, a knowing warmth in her eyes. "You were meant for this," she said softly. Lila nodded, feeling gratitude for the quiet support that had always been her foundation. The meeting with the producer was nerve-wracking. Lila played a piece she had been refining, improvising some sections, and pouring her emotions into every note. The producer watched intently, his eyes wide with admiration. When she finished, the silence that followed felt heavy with anticipation. Then he smiled, leaning back in his chair. "You have something extraordinary," he said. "Not just the skill, but the feeling, the story in your music. I think we can help you share it with the world." Lila felt a mix of relief, excitement, and disbelief. The journey she had begun quietly in a small cafe was taking a new turn, one that she had never imagined possible. Back at the cafe, she continued to perform for the regulars, each time feeling the same rush of joy and connection. But now there was a sense of purpose behind her playing. Each note was part of a larger story, a preparation for the opportunities to come. She felt her confidence growing, not just as a performer but as a person who had discovered the courage to embrace her talent fully. The shy, humble waitress who had once hidden her gift was becoming someone ready to face the world, her music acting as both her voice and her bridge to others. News of her talent continued to spread, and invitations to perform arrived more frequently. Lila found herself balancing work at the cafe with rehearsals, meetings, and small performances. It was challenging, exhausting at times, but deeply fulfilling. She discovered that her music could influence and inspire people, giving them a sense of hope and joy she had never fully realized before. The gratitude and admiration from audiences reminded her that her talent was a gift meant to be shared. One quiet evening, after a long day of performances and meetings, Lila sat at her piano in the cafe during closing time. She played softly, letting the music flow freely, reflecting on how far she had come. Each melody carried memories of her journey, the long hours of work, the quiet moments of practice in her imagination, the challenges she had overcome, and the joy of connecting with others through her music. She realized that the journey was not just about success or recognition. It was about embracing her gift and using it to touch hearts and tell stories that words could not convey. Her grandmother joined her quietly, sitting in the corner and listening to the gentle notes fill the cafe. Lila smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the support, love, and encouragement that had always been her anchor. They shared a quiet moment, understanding that this was just the beginning of a life filled with music, opportunities, and growth. The music had not only changed her life but had also created connections and inspiration that extended far beyond what she had imagined. Over the following months, Lila's life continued to evolve. She performed at more venues, met fellow musicians, and explored different styles and genres. Each experience added depth to her skill and understanding, enriching her music and her connection with audiences. Yet, she never lost sight of her roots. The cafe remained a special place, a reminder of the beginnings of her journey, and she returned whenever she could to play for the people who had first supported her. It was there, among the familiar faces and cozy atmosphere, that she felt grounded, reminded of who she was and why she played. In quiet moments, Lila reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the shy, hardworking waitress who dreamed of music in secret, to a performer who could touch hearts with every note. She had grown in ways she had never imagined. She understood that talent alone was not enough. Courage, persistence, and a willingness to step forward had been just as important. And as she continued to play, she knew that her story was still unfolding, with countless notes yet to be written and melodies yet to be shared. Lila realized that her journey was not just about her. Her music inspired others to pursue their own hidden talents, to take risks, and to embrace the parts of themselves they had long kept secret. Each performance became more than just sound. It became a message, a bridge, and a shared experience. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the path she had chosen was not just her own but connected to the lives of many others who listened, felt, and believed. As she finally closed her eyes that night, Lila allowed herself to imagine the future. She saw larger audiences, stages she had never stepped on, and music reaching far beyond the small city she had always known. She felt excitement, gratitude, and a quiet determination. Her gift had revealed itself, and now it was her responsibility and privilege to continue sharing it with the world. The journey that had begun in a small cafe had transformed her life, and she knew that the music within her would continue to guide her, inspire others, and create moments of wonder for years to come. Lila had found her voice, and with it, she had discovered the power to change her life and the lives of those who listened.